Hi, and welcome back to Pages and Projects with Liz. Today I have my January reading wrap up. I read 18 books for the month of January and managed to hit a couple of my different reading goals for the year. And so I'm really happy about the progress that I've been making. The first book that I read was Absolutely by Joanna Lumley. This one I gave 4 stars to. This was a really interesting read. I listened to the audiobook of this. I love for memoirs if I can get the original author to narrate the audiobook. I will often pick that up. But this is certainly a book that you want to look at in addition to hearing the audiobook. And that's because throughout it, there are just all of these really interesting pictures that go with the story. So if you're only listening to the audiobook, while it's great hearing it, you miss out on all of these snapshots that go along with it. This book was interesting because I grew up watching a lot of different British shows on the US, and Absolutely Fabulous was one that I watched a lot with my mom. So this was cool because I knew this actress from there, but I didn't know anything about the rest of her life other than, again, the character that she played on that show. And it was really cool to find out how much she had done. So she's got quite a remarkable life, and just all of the places that she's traveled and the different things that she's been involved with and all of the languages that she spoke. Really loved it and was so happy to start out my month reading this. The next book I read was The Lady's Road Guide to Utter Ruin by Alison Goodman. This one I read in part to finish out a series. Really liked the story. Just like the first one, I gave this one 4 stars also. Again, solving a mystery, a woman doing things that wouldn't have been expected for this period in time. Just really kind of cozy book that I enjoy. From what I saw, this finished the series. There were just 2 books referenced so far, but it certainly ended where I would be interested to continue reading more. So it finished at a nice point, but also I want to know where all of the characters go from here. And so I would be very happy if there winds up being more books in the series and not just the 2 that I've read so far. Next up, I have Did You Hear About Kitty Carr by Crystal Smith Paul. This book I also gave 4 stars to. Overall, this was a pretty good reading month for me. This book is a book that I selected to work on my goal of reading down some of my backlist book subscription box picks. And so this was a book that I had received from Book of the Month. It's a book that I had mentioned before. I was a little hesitant to read just because it was a genre that I wasn't sure was super up my alley. But the particular month that I had picked it, it was really the only book that sounded even remotely interesting. So this book was told with dual timelines, with different chapters from a different character's point of view. So it was based off of Kitty in the past and Elise in the present for this timeline. I'll have to say that overall, the Kitty chapters are what did it for me. Her chapters were just so great. It was so interesting for the history at the time, the things that she went through, all of the racism and segregation and everything. Was just really fascinated with reading from her perspective. The more current timeline, Elise, those are fine. It didn't really hit the way that the Kitty chapters hit. So I think if the book had been just the Elise chapters, probably would have been more like a 3-star for me. It was the Kitty chapters that really did it for me. So very much enjoyed the book. I didn't think that, the dual timelines were difficult to follow. The things that you find out about Kitty and her past, I thought wound up being a little bit predictable, but I don't want to spoil it in case it wasn't for someone else. But again, really enjoyed this book overall. Next up, I have an ebook that I read, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This one was another 4-star read. I read this book for the Books and Lala buzzword cover word challenge. So for this month, it was before or after. This one I checked out through the library, so also worked on a goal of reading more books from the library. It was about a woman who found out that she inherited a house from her past. So something I mentioned before, I've read a couple of books like that where there's an inheritance, someone goes back to the house, she's looking to flip it and sell it for some work that she does with her company. And this was a house where there supposed to be hauntings before, and her dad had written a book about what had happened and them fleeing the house. I thought it was really cool with the twists that were in it. It leads you to believe certain things as you're going through and reading it. And then more and more bits come out as to what led to some of the items disappearing, the ghostly figures that she had been seeing as a child. And overall, I just thought this was a really fun book on this topic. So definitely enjoyed that book. Next, I have The Wedding People by Alison Espach. This is another Book of the Month book that I had received before. I think it was one that I had selected because of their awards that they did, but again, was another book that I was a little unsure about reading. This one I wound up also giving 4 stars to, but I was really torn and went back and forth on whether that should be a 3-star book or a 4-star book. So it's about this woman who goes to a resort to end her life, and she winds up being at a resort at the same time that a wedding is going on, and so meets up with the bride and then some of the other members of the wedding party, and so very much becomes involved with that. The book had some really nice moments about friendship and a little romance that was in there. And so there were parts that I really enjoyed, but then other parts where it seemed like it was making light of topics that were really serious. And so that's why I kept flip-flopping between the two. Right now, I'm landing at a 4-star because I think where it went with the story, the depth of some of the other characters and the things that are going on, I really enjoyed. I liked the ending to it. Again, I liked how it wrapped up. I just think that it moved on a little quickly from some of the initial concerns that the main character had and what she was trying to do. And again, kind of making light and some jokes about that whole piece. That part I did not enjoy. So again, for right now, landing at a 4-star. If I sit with this further, might change that again, but that's where I'm at for today. After that, I had a couple more books on my Kindle. The next one was The Kill Clause by Lisa Unger. That one I gave 3 stars to. It was a short story. It was about some characters that are essentially assassins, a little bit of a romance plot. someone trying to finish a job, not finishing it. And so she's now being chased after. So overall, it was a fine read, nothing super memorable. I think it might have been a free Kindle book, but it was, fine for what it was. After that, I had Our Fake Marriage volumes 15 and 16. So this was a manga, and reading these two volumes finished out the series. So this is something that I had mentioned in my series tracker video, that especially with graphic novels, waiting so long for the next edition to come out in translation is kind of rough for me to remember where all of the characters are at. And so I think moving forward, I'm more likely to read a series when I know that all of the books are already out, so that I can go through them at a better pace. But I did still enjoy these. I gave both of them 4 stars. I'm glad to have read the whole series. Overall, it's about, 2 characters that had gone to school before, meeting back up, pretending to be married, actually falling in love. So kind of a lot of tropes that you see in some other manga series. But it was cute. I really enjoyed the artwork, and that's really a big thing for me. I'm a sucker for nice artwork. And it was just kind of a fun, sweet story. So again, overall, gave those both 4 stars. Next up, I have Slewfoot by Brahm, and this was my first 5-star read of the year. I don't know why I put off reading this book for so long. I absolutely loved it. It's a book taking place in the US, Puritan time. There's some pretty illustrations on the inside of the book. And I just thought it was a really interesting take for that time period. Having a woman who is a little bit more assertive, and what that means then, and the trouble that it causes, where there's then witchcraft accusations, all the way to actually getting vengeance on some of the people in that town. So absolutely loved it. Had been thinking this would be a 5-star, and just had been waiting for the right time, and I'm glad that I finally read it this month. Next up is another Kindle book. I read The Resurrectionist by A. Ray Dunlap, and this book I gave 3 stars to. This was a book I read for my yearly reading goal of reading at least 12 Kindle Unlimited books. So this was a KU book. It sounded a lot more interesting from the description when I had picked it out online. So it was billed as historical fiction, true crime, and dark academia intertwine in a harrowing tale of murder, greed, and the grisly origins of modern medicine. So there's a young man who is looking to be a doctor, and he's studying. He gets caught up in this group that is doing grave robbing in order to procure different corpses for practice at these schools. So it sounded a lot more interesting. It talked to where I had first seen it, about being at the time of these 2 particular killers who were murdering people in order to get even fresher corpses. But those 2 people played such a tiny role in the story. So I would say that the romance between 2 of the characters I thought was a lot stronger and more prominent in the story than about the true crime kind of aspect of it. And that's fine. I just had gone into it selecting it for more of that true crime piece. So that's why it really wound up as a 3 stars for me. I think if I had different expectations going in, might have approached that differently for my rating, but it still was a fine book. It just really wasn't what I was expecting from the original description that I had read online. Next, I have When the Crow's Away by Aurelie Wallace. So this was another book to finish out a series. And I have, again, really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. So similar to the first book where I thought it was cozy, there is a mystery of trying to figure out the death of one of the characters. So our main character in this can see ghosts and talk to them. And so she is communicating with that spirit to figure out what led to his death. So I thought it was cute. I thought it brought up a lot of good conversations. The character had lost her husband in the past, and so there's some different parts about relatives wanting her to move on and what that means, and still kind of honoring your loved one even after they've deceased. But also that's not necessarily a quick process to go through. So I enjoyed this book, and again, it finished out a series, so this was the last one for this duology. Next, I read 4 more digital books. I read the Romantic Killer series, so volumes 1 through 4. This was a manga that I read on Shoujin Jump. So 38 chapters. It was adorable. I gave them 4 stars. Again, really enjoyed the artwork. I liked the whole premise of it where there's this little magical being that meets up with our main female character and is trying to get her to have a romance, to care about something other than games and chocolate and her cat. And so it throws her into a lot of scenarios that play up different tropes. So, about characters needing to move in together, and a childhood best friend, and a rich character. And it acknowledges that they're all tropes for other series. So, again, I thought it was cute. It was a new series I started, but also finished, all in the same span, reading through all 38 chapters, which wound up being 4 volumes. Next, I have Violet Thistlethwaite is Not a Villain Anymore by Emily Krempholtz. This one I also gave 4 stars to. This is another book that I was reading to read some backlist book subscription box picks. So this particular edition is Owl Crate, but I had also received it as a Book of the Month book. This is just the edition that I'm going to keep. Book I gave 4 stars to. It was really cute read. So Violet was an assistant, essentially, to a villain. She was the Thorn Witch. And now that villain is no longer around, she's trying to move on and start a new life in a little town. I thought that the fantasy aspects of it were cute. I thought that the romance was pretty adorable. There were some moments that were a little cringy for some of the spice scenes. Again, part of it is mainly some of the conversation or the terms they use. I just find a little off-putting. So while I don't necessarily need like a fade to black kind of romance story, and I am fine reading some rather smutty depictions, there's just certain phrases or words that really bother me. Instead of them being, clearer and more specific about what they're doing. Just some of the references were But overall, that was a relatively small part of the book. A lot more of it was about sort of found family and meeting up with some other characters who had gone through similar things in the past. And again, all of that outweighed the little tiny bit of smut that I wasn't a fan of. And so that's why I gave it a 4-star overall. I think if they hadn't used that wording choice, certainly would have been another 5-star read. But that's what really dropped it down to a 4-star for me. Next up, I had another Kindle read. So I read Haunted by Willow Cross. This one I gave 3 stars to. This was a book that I read in part to read another short story, so I am trying to read some more of my short stories because I do tend to put them off. I didn't count any of the graphic novels that I read towards that goal of reading books that were 300 pages or less. So I wanted to read this one, as well as to try to chip away at my Kindle TBR. I think my physical TBR I see more often, and so it's easier to remember how many books that I have to go through there. With Kindle, because it's all digital, it just feels really easy to keep adding books to it and not quite paying attention or getting back to it. This book had a couple of stories that the author had gone through at different places that she lived. I thought they were, kind of interesting haunted tales. I like hearing ghost stories. I like stories that are supposed to be based off of real happenings. So I enjoyed that part. I just thought that the writing style was a little too conversational going through the different stories. And so it just felt a little light and short hopping from case to case of what happened to the different places that she had lived. And so that's why I wound up with a 3-star rating overall. So it was fine. Again, I don't know if I paid for this book or if I got it as a free Kindle book. But it was kind of a fun read. Nothing was like overly dramatic for any of the hauntings. They all sounded a bit more realistic. It just was sort of the writing style wasn't my favorite. And then the last book I read for the month was Shakespeare, The Man Who Pays the Rent by Judi Dench. So similar to the first book that I started out with, this is another kind of life story from a British actress that I grew up watching her in different pieces. But this was talking about her time in different Shakespeare plays. So I saw her more in other British comedies on TV later on. I knew that she had a background as an actress in Shakespeare plays, and so it was really cool reading about that. I liked how the book was set up. A lot of the chapters were titled after different Shakespeare plays, and then she talked about the different characters that she played in that particular play and some things that were going on with her life at those different times. It's very conversational. So it's all snippets where she's talking to someone else, and so there's little italicized blurbs of what they said first and then her responses to it. This is one that I had considered getting the audiobook for, but it wasn't fully narrated by her. So I thought it was narrated by her and the other person asking the questions. I believe I had saw that she did some of it, but most of the parts that are her speaking is really somebody else. And so that's why I didn't end up going with it. I do think that because there are different snippets from the plays, this would be a really good audiobook to hear the lines being read out loud, especially where she's talking about the different parts that she'd put emphasis on, or the pacing, or the snippets that are cut between two different characters. I think hearing that would be really interesting. It's just that overall, I really only do audiobooks for memoirs if they're narrated by the actual person. So maybe at some point I'll check it out if it ever is available through the library. I just didn't want to pay full price for an audiobook that wasn't quite what I was hoping for. But this was awesome. I didn't realize that she had been in so many different plays, and how direct she is at some of the points, and the little doodles that are on some of the pages. It was just really great and a fantastic way to end out my month for reading. So those were the 18 books that I read for the month of January. I don't know that I am going to read that many books every month moving forward. I did try to read quite a few graphic novels that I kept putting off in the past. And so that was fun to finally go through and enjoy those. Storygraph says that my average rating for this month was 3.89. So I gave it the most 4 stars, but the 3 stars that I did kind of drag that down a little bit compared to only 1 5-star. But overall, a really solid reading month for me. I'd love to know from you what you read in January, if there were any standout favorites for you. Again, absolutely loved Slewfoot. Glad that I read it this month. If you have any books that you would recommend that are similar to that, or any of the other books that I said that I really enjoyed, as much as I'm trying to clear off my TBR, would love to hear some more recommendations of other books to pick out. So thank you for joining me. I hope you had a great month to kick off the reading for a new year, and I will see you in my next video.